Welcome to the Cheating Wife Stories channel. I'm leaving, I declared. Fine, and don't come back, responded my spouse. Usually, when I walked out the door, my parting remark would be, go to hell. But this time, I felt that I didn't want my final words to her to be so harsh. Over the 14 years of our marriage, we exchanged such expressions many times. But this time, I won't be returning. In a few days, she might understand the meaning behind my words. Over the past 6 to 7 months, Jenna, my wife, has become increasingly hurtful in her remarks towards me. I couldn't understand what was happening. Her words were sharp and offensive. To avoid escalating the situation, I began avoiding her as much as possible. I spent more and more time in the car, coming home late, even after Jenna and her 13-year-old daughter had already had dinner. Sometimes I found leftovers. Sometimes they were already in the trash before I got home. My name is Kurt K. Kaminsky. Actually, my full name is David Kurt Kaminsky, but to avoid confusion with my father, also named David, they started calling me Kurt. I'm not a junior. My father is David John Kaminsky. Why he didn't give me the name Junior, I don't know. I would have been happy even with the nickname Junior or DJ, but I was limited to Kurt or nothing. Yes, I'm Polish, or more precisely, an American of Polish descent. And yes, I've heard all the jokes on this subject. Living in a small town with a population of about 10,000, I've become the subject of many of them. Although formally, I'm only half Polish, the other half is German, French, Irish, and English, but my surname Kaminsky makes me Polish. My wife, who will soon become my ex-wife, turned out not to be the person I thought she was. I found out about this just 4 weeks ago. My distant behavior over the past months was caused by her cruel words and actions. One Monday evening, I decided to have a snack at a local restaurant and overheard a conversation in the next booth. It turned out that my wife and my best friend, George Carey, were deceiving me. It was a blow. They talked about how they spent time together while I was busy in the parking lot, unaware of anything. I left trying to get away so they wouldn't notice me. It was unbelievable. Jenna was with George. He even served as the chauffeur at our wedding. He's my mechanic, who will still be servicing my cars for some time. Although strictly speaking, he's not my mechanic, but an independent contractor whom I hire for repairs and maintenance of my vehicles. Yes, I'm a used car salesman. I also heard all these jokes and insults. However, my business is very good. People know they will get a great car at a good price. They also know that I am responsible for my cars. If problems arise, I take care of them. George has always been a good mechanic, and I keep him busy and pay him well. I wanted to hire him, but he said that he won't respect himself if he has a pull as a boss. He said it jokingly, but I knew he was serious. Regardless, I hired him as my independent mechanic contractor, although he was not very independent. In fact, I was his only source of income. This fact will be his death. I left the restaurant and drove around the neighborhood. Could this be true? I asked myself, or is he just toying? They could have hired a private detective. But if what he said was true, then they only met twice a month. This may turn out to be a waste of money, but what I could do was check her phone and email. This is exactly what I decided to do. I returned home, and Jenna was as out of sorts as ever. This suited me. I didn't want to talk to her until I found out the truth. After she went to sleep on her side of the bed, I got up and checked her email. There was nothing suspicious there. Her phone was secured with a password. Yet it didn't take me long to ascertain that our daughter's birthday was the code. I noticed a few messages that could have been misinterpreted, but none from George. His name was among her contacts. But then again, he was my closest companion, so it wasn't unusual. Perhaps he was merely speaking humorously. Nonetheless, her recent behavior led me to believe that something might be amiss, perhaps not with George, but with someone else. I retired to bed, tossing and turning in an attempt to find sleep. It must have been sometime after 2:43 am when it occurred, as that was the last time I checked the clock. The following day, at the car dealership, George arrived and made jests about the polls. This was typical of him, and I usually chuckled and let it pass. However, today I confronted him. "George, what do you truly know about Poland? I wager if I presented a map of the world, you wouldn't be able to locate it. You jest that all Poles are foolish, yet I'm certain they could locate the U.S., and perhaps even our state, on a map. Why don't you educate yourself?" George looked at me, unsure of what to say. He knew I was correct. He couldn't point out Poland if his life depended on it. George was never one for academic pursuits. He possessed street smarts and mechanical knowledge, but he had never been a scholar. I suppose that's why he gravitated towards me in high school. I helped him with his studies so he could at least graduate. Now I find myself reconsidering my choice of companions, making me contemplate my choice of spouse. I retreated to my office, closing the door behind me, pondering how I could gather evidence of what might be transpiring. Confronting them both would only lead to denial. I needed proof. I contacted a private investigator in Santa Fe, expressing my concerns. However, he informed me that monitoring them would be too costly, given that it only occurred twice a month. Instead, he suggested installing a beacon on my wife's phone, allowing me to track its location discreetly. He also mentioned the option of installing cameras in our home, but warned that unless I invested in high-quality, expensive ones, they would likely be discovered. I opted for the tracking program he recommended and assured him of payment for his advice. Despite his insistence that I owed him nothing, I felt compelled to compensate him for his assistance. That evening, after everyone had retired for the night, I surreptitiously installed the tracking app on my wife's phone and synced it with mine. It would operate inconspicuously in the background, unbeknownst to her. The next day, I checked the app periodically, noting her whereabouts. She worked part-time at the university bookstore, typically for 15 to 20 hours a week, earning discretionary income which she often spent at the salon. Later, she was at the grocery store before returning home. George, on the other hand, was home for most of the day, but coincidentally absent whenever Jenna was present. This provided some assurance that nothing untoward had occurred that day. Determined to mend relations with my wife and daughter, I suggested dining out together. Although my wife seemed somewhat apprehensive, my daughter, Carrie, displayed typical teenage reluctance. Despite her hesitance, I insisted, and she reluctantly accompanied us. Dinner was pleasant, though I made a point to mention George in conversation. Jenna's discomfort was evident as she quickly changed the subject, further fueling my suspicions. I yearned to uncover the truth behind George's remarks. That evening, I refrained from checking her phone, finding no success in examining her calls or messages. Either she deleted them promptly or refrained from making any at all. As we settled into bed, I thanked Jenna for joining us for dinner. She responded with gratitude, hinting at intimacy with her gaze. Mixed emotions swirled within me. If she had been unfaithful, did I desire intimacy? Resolved to await concrete evidence, I decided to let her initiate any further intimacy, hesitant to reciprocate until I had confirmed my suspicions. I refrained from taking the initiative. Eventually, we engaged in intimacy, but it was rather mundane. There's no need to delve into specifics. Nonetheless, I found some enjoyment in it. For the remainder of the week, I monitored the location of her phone, finding nothing unusual. On Saturday evening, after she had fallen asleep, I checked her phone for any messages or calls, once again finding nothing. I was on the verge of convincing myself that George was merely boasting, fabricating tales to impress someone with his intimate escapades. This wasn't the first time I had known this tendency since our school days. Returning to bed, I continued to toss and turn, my subconscious refusing to allow me rest. It was 2 o'clock in the morning and I lay there, gazing at the ceiling, unable to sleep. Eventually, I rose from bed and made my way downstairs for a drink, hoping it would help me sleep. Seated with a glass of Jack Daniels and Coke in one hand and her phone in the other, I decided to check it once more. Entering the password, our daughter's date of birth. I unlocked the phone and navigated to the homepage. Suddenly, it struck me like an electric shock. Our daughter's birth date was the key. The pregnancy had been arduous. There were moments when we feared we might lose her. Something about her RA factor didn't align with my wife's. It felt as though my wife's body was at odds with the baby growing inside her. In the final 3 weeks of pregnancy, my wife was confined to bed rest to ensure she could carry the baby to term. And indeed she did. Exactly 9 months after our wedding, Carrie was born. We were overjoyed that she was healthy, but she proved to be a challenging child. Constant crying, difficulty sleeping, reluctance to nurse, whatever it was, it made things difficult. In the second year of Carrie's life, my wife adamantly declared that we wouldn't be having another child. While it saddened me, the truth was, the arrival of our first child had drained much of the joy from our lives. Considering that she was born precisely 9 months after our wedding, she fell into the category often referred to as wedding night babies, conceived on the wedding night or during the honeymoon. A realization dawned on me. If George's claims were true, there was a strong likelihood that Jenna was already pregnant before our wedding night. Jenna had been on birth control pills, and we hadn't waited until marriage to engage in intimacy. In fact, it had been a significant part of our relationship. When questioned about Jenna's pregnancy, the doctor suggested that the stress of the wedding may have rendered the pills ineffective. If they were ineffective that night, it stood to reason they were ineffective before as well. Now I knew what needed to be done. There was a 50% chance that I wasn't the father. You know the saying, the early bird catches the worm. Well, in George's case, it seemed more fitting to say, the early worm catches the birdie. Rising from the couch, I made my way to the bathroom, where I retrieved some cotton swabs before heading to Carrie's room. She was fast asleep, finally settling into a good sleep schedule at the age of 4. She lay there, snoring softly, mouth agape. It was easy enough for me to take a Q-tip and swab the inside of her cheek. She didn't stir as I carefully sealed it in a plastic Ziploc bag. I repeated the process for myself. If it turned out Carrie was my biological daughter, it would still leave questions about Jenna's fidelity. If she wasn't genetically mine, well, I'd cross that bridge when I came to it. Sunday was dedicated to household chores, with each of us having our own responsibilities. I took my time, avoiding prolonged interaction with Jenna or Carrie to conceal my emotions. Though eager to uncover the truth, doubts plagued me throughout the day. Jenna eventually questioned my demeanor, to which I quickly responded with a fabricated explanation about plans for our business. She always referred to the business as ours, which, in a way, was comforting, though in reality, I had established a separate entity for the car park to protect my personal assets. Living in a conservative community, I was cautious not to let business dealings impact my personal life negatively. The idea to pay off credit cards and minimize financial risks stemmed from a desire to shield myself from potential fallout if Jenna were to discover my plans. This sudden realization prompted me to take action. Early Monday morning, I took the samples to Western New Mexico University and consulted with the head of the science department regarding genetic testing. They were accommodating, offering to conduct the necessary tests as part of their cellular and molecular biology program. I gave him some of my business cards and told him that he or anyone who worked on the samples would get 10% off the purchase. He seemed to appreciate it. I was thinking about replacing my Camry with a newer car. I may have to stop by and take a look at your selection. If you don't see anything you like, just let me know, and I'll work with you to find something you like. I told him. Thank you. I'll do that, he replied. I smiled when I left the university, but it was a concerned smile. The results could have been the end of my marriage. When I told Jenna about buying new cars to fill my lot, it was only to hide my worried expression. Now, I thought, this isn't a bad idea. I called Paul, my accountant, loan officer, and part-time salesperson, into my office and told him about my idea. We will succeed, he said. Paul, there's something else I'd like to do. I would like to pay off the mortgage on my house. Can we agree on a lump sum payment so I can do this? Let me take a look at the financials and get back to you after lunch, he said. As he left my office, I thought about calling my lawyer and asking for a referral to a family lawyer. Then I thought, you may be in a hurry. Let's see what the results are first. After all, I have yet to find any evidence that my wife was having an affair. After lunch, Paul showed me the spreadsheet, and we discussed next steps for both of my plans. The next 2 days were some of the longest. I was on the verge of death while waiting for the DNA test results. Late on Wednesday evening, the head of the department called me. He was coming to us with the results and to look at the car. When he arrived, I directed him straight to my office. He looked at me, and the look on his face told me what the results were. Then he spoke and confirmed it. The two samples collected are not related to each other. I nodded my head, and he could tell that, although I had expected it, I was devastated by the news. He gave me a minute to think it over and handed me a manila envelope with the results. When I looked up at him, my expression changed. So, what car were you thinking about? Well, I know this sounds cliché, but I just turned 50 and I'm looking for a sports car. I was thinking about the Mazda Maya. I told him that I did not have such a car, but that I was going to the auction the next day and would try to find one that was in good mechanical and cosmetic condition. I'll call him this afternoon and let him know what I found. When he left, I told Anna that I would leave early, but if she needed me, I would only be a phone call away. I knew she wouldn't call. She rarely needed me. She could handle almost anything that needed to be done. I drove around the city, just watching. Strange, but for me, everything looked different. Then I called my lawyer. He was saddened by the news but referred me to another lawyer who he knew would do the right thing. After calling, I made an appointment for late evening the next day. I had a snack at a restaurant and thought while I was eating, have I really wasted the last 15 years of my life? I couldn't even say that I had a child from this marriage. Of course, I still considered her, to some extent, my child, but biologically, she was not. What should I do next? I knew I couldn't act like I didn't know anything. Of course, I wasn't ignorant before, but now that I knew, there was no turning back. One thing I knew for sure, George would pay. I didn't care that he had been my best friend for years. With friends like him, I could use more enemies. Janet would pay too. I wonder if she knew Carrie wasn't mine. Even if not, she hid this secret from me. The secret of her intimacy on her wedding day with my best man, my best friend. Now I had no reason not to believe what I had overheard. She had fun with him at least twice a month. I started to feel angry, and before I got out of control, I needed to be alone, away from everyone. I should have called Jenna and told her I wouldn't be home that evening. I couldn't go home. I would most likely do something that would land me in jail. She answered the call. Hello, Kurt. Hey, I'm going to spend the night in Albuquerque, so I can be ready for the auction at 8, I said emotionlessly. Oh, fine. Bon voyage. I don't usually go to Albuquerque for auctions, so this was unusual. I wondered if she would take advantage of the fact that I would be gone all night. She would have to blame Carrie on my parents, and it would be difficult to explain. However, I will periodically look at her phony tracker throughout the evening to see if she has decided to go somewhere else. I followed the roads to Albuquerque. I wanted to buy at least 20 cars, including a Mazda Miata. I would arrange to have them picked up and sent to my lot after the auction is over. Now the question in my head was who to entrust their mechanical inspection to. I knew that George would not get any more work from me after his routine inspections and machine repairs were completed. When he hears that I bought 24 cars, dollar signs will appear in his eyes. How much he can charge me for all this work. However, this will not happen, and I will keep it a secret until the last minute. I needed to talk to one of the local auction dealers to see who would be good enough and reliable enough to inspect them before shipping them to our small town. I got to Albuquerque around 9 a.m. and checked into a Best Western hotel. Even though I was the owner, I could not allow the money for an expensive hotel to be divided from the company's accounts. The room was comfortable, as was the bed. That's all I needed. I am a simple person with simple needs. When I entered the room, I immediately checked Jenna's phone tracker. I discovered that she was still at home, or at least her phone was at home. That night, sleep was difficult. I kept going over in my mind why she did what she did. How could she justify having a night with him on our wedding day, let alone twice a month for who knows how many years? I began to reconsider our marriage. He was never perfect, but I thought we loved each other exclusively. Now I know that this was a mistake on my part from the very beginning. In the first few years after the wedding, things were not easy. Of course, we weren't expecting a baby right away. We originally planned to wait 3 to 4 years and then start a family. 3 children are what we agreed on before the wedding. However, the fight with Carrie ruined these plans. When I found out that these plans were ruined by my best friend, all the struggle began to seem in vain. 14 years of wasted effort. There had been good times, of course, but even those were now overshadowed by this news. If Jenna hadn't had intimate with George, maybe she would have gotten pregnant with me. And maybe she wouldn't have had such a bad pregnancy and difficult child that made her not one anymore. George ruined my life when he seduced my future wife on my wedding day. Now he entertains her at least twice a month, and I'm sure that all the time he laughs at the ignorant pull he must pay. I thought to myself, lying down and trying to sleep. I was furious again. I needed to calm down. Otherwise, I wouldn't be able to sleep. I turned on the TV to some mindless comedy show. Laughter helped me calm down, and by 11 p.m., I was ready to fall asleep, looking forward to a long day. The auction went well. I got some great cars at great prices and got to know some dealers in the Albuquerque area. I didn't see any Miatas at auction, so I started asking other dealers. 2 of them had one each, one red, the other black. I asked them if they would be willing to make a deal once I found out what color my client preferred. Of course, each of them said, "Just let me know what cars are on your lot, and we'll get it done." I should have come to this auction more often. Communication with other businessmen engaged in the same type of business inspired me to expand my business. Besides, it distracted me from my problems. In the afternoon, when I met with the lawyer, the news was not very good. I will lose half of all my property and will have to pay alimony and child support. Child support for a child that wasn't even mine. Then I decided that I would not get a divorce. Instead, I'll leave her with George's baby. I would pay off the mortgage on the house. She could have stayed in it. But my name was the only one on the mortgage, so she couldn't sell it if I moved out, but continued to pay taxes and utilities. She wouldn't be able to resign and take the house. However, I had to decide what to do with my business. It was registered as a corporation, but somehow I knew that if I didn't do something to protect it, I could lose it. I needed to talk to my business lawyer about this. When I walked through the door of my house, I was exhausted from a long day. So I said to Jenna, "I'm tired. I'm going to take a shower and go straight to bed," and went to the bedroom. "Do you want to have dinner?" she called. "No, I had a late lunch," I answered. At least she thought to ask. The shower was wonderful. It felt like my problems almost melted away. I had problems, but I was on my way to solving them. I fell asleep a few minutes after my head hit the pillow. I had been stressed for the past week, and now that I had started making a plan of action, my mind could rest. Waking up early and feeling refreshed, I headed to the office before Jenna and Carrie even woke up. I had things to do and even more plans. When my staff started arriving, they found me knee-deep in spreadsheets, financial reports, and sales forecasts. I told Paul that I had purchased 23 cars and that within a week, we would close the deal on the car at the dealer in Albuquerque. I told Anna not to assign any more work to George, but to keep it a secret. She looked at me with a puzzled expression. "You are the boss." "Thank you, Anna. You are irreplaceable." At 9 a.m., I called my business lawyer and asked him what I should do. "Well, your business is registered, but there may still be a way she can force you to sell it to get half of its value. Have you thought about selling it beforehand? No. Do I need to? This will keep the business out of her hands, he said. This business is my life. I can't get rid of it, I told him. Okay, let me think a little and study the situation. I'll call you at the end of the week. This news was devastating. I have worked hard to build my business into what it is today. Here's the corrected passage. This is my child. Unlike Carrie, I thought to myself. Now I was filled with rage. Again, part of being a good business person is the ability to compartmentalize and multitask. I needed to put my personal problems aside and get back to business. First on my list was to call Doug, the department chair, who determined that what George said was true. Doug, Kurt Kaminsky, I have information about 2 Miatas that might interest you. One is red, and the other is black. Are you still thinking about it? I asked. Yes, if the price is right, he said. What color are you interested in? I'll bring it here so you can look at it, and then we'll discuss the numbers. Even if we can't agree on a price, I'm sure I can sell it without too much trouble. And which one would you suggest? He asked. Each has its pros and cons. Fire red is a great statement color, but it fades faster. Black looks elegant, but in our climate, it gets hot quickly. Will this car be kept in a garage when you are not using it? Yes, I can do it. Then the red won't be exposed to the sun much, so fading won't be a problem. I'd go with this unless you think black is more your style. Red sounds great. How soon can I see her? Is Monday or Tuesday suitable for you? Of course. Call me when you receive it. Fine. I hung up and called the dealer who had the red one to arrange a trade. He became interested in the BMW on my property. It had been there for 3 months. He would have had a better chance of selling it in a big city by this time. George arrived. He had several cars that still needed to be repaired. Being an independent contractor, he could come and go as he pleased, and as long as the job was done at the time I needed the car, I was fine with it. He overheard several salesmen talking about 23 cars that would soon appear in our warehouse. Hey, Kurt, where are these cars coming from the auction? I want to make sure I have a schedule to do this for you, he said. It will be sometime at the end of next week or early next week. The auction house will arrange for their delivery here, I told him. It was difficult for me to talk to him calmly. To this damn traitor. Okay, I'll contact Anna and ask her to put me on the schedule, he said. I just chuckled to myself as he left. That weekend, I tried to keep my distance from Jenna. I worked in the yard and ran a lot of errands. I didn't even check her phone tracker. For me, it no longer mattered. I felt only contempt for her. The fact that I was raising someone else's child was unforgivable. On Monday, I was at the car show again. I called the dealer in Albuquerque and told him I would drive the Beamer over and pick up the Miata. He replied, "Great, we'll have a late lunch when you arrive." It was a good day for a trip, so I told Anna that I would be gone all day. Hold the line, I told her. Okay, boss, she replied. She truly was irreplaceable. I need to give her a raise, I told myself. The trip was pleasant, as was the lunch. The other owner made me feel welcome, and I felt like I had a new friend. On the way back, driving the Miata, I really enjoyed myself. The top was down, and the wind was ruffling my hair. I decided that I would call another dealer and get a black car. I needed to live a little, and I won't be needing more than a 2-seater anytime soon. I pulled into our driveway in a red sports car. Jenna looked out the window and must have said something to Carrie, because they both came out to watch. Honey, why do you need this car? You know we need something with a back seat for Carrie, she said condescendingly. I just picked her up from Albuquerque for a client. Thought you might want to ride it, I replied. No, honey, I don't like small cars, Jenna said with slight contempt. Carrie, I said, motioning for my daughter to sit down. No, Dad, I feel bad enough that they teased me because of my last name. I don't want to be seen driving around with a polished used car salesman." She said it like only a teenager could say it. I was stunned, to say the least. Where did this disrespect come from? When I looked at Jenna, I realized that she was acting as if Carrie had done nothing wrong. Great, now both women in my house are disrespectful to me. I know teenagers aren't supposed to be best buds with their parents, but the hurtful way she said it made me look at my entire family life as a sham. "Well, I'm going to go for another ride. I'll be back as soon as I can," I said, putting the car in reverse and driving away. I drove along the roads of Silver City and its environs, fired up. My marriage was rapidly deteriorating. When I finally pulled into the driveway at 9:30, I immediately went upstairs, hopped in the shower, and climbed into bed. When I didn't come down from my shower, Jenna got up and came into the room. The light from the corridor shone directly into my eyes. I squinted and closed them. "What? Are your feelings hurt because we didn't choose a sports car? Aren't you going to come down and spend time with your family? You are not only a Pole, you are also a child. Where did this attitude come from?" I had to believe it came from George. She spent time with him, and his stripped-down attitude towards my roots rubbed off on her. Now she is passing it on to her daughter. It was her daughter, not mine. I guess I should get that into my head. I may have to support her, but she is not my daughter. It looks like you and your daughter would rather not have a Pole around, so you might as well just off. I was furious, and her attitude wasn't helping her one bit. She'll regret ever treating me the way she does now. Needless to say, from then on, the Kaminsky house was quiet and cold. The next day, I called Doug, and he came to check out the Miata. He was delighted. We talked the numbers over, and he was surprised at what a great price he got, $3,000 less than Kelly Blue Book. When he was about to leave, having filled out all the papers, he said, "My best friend is in charge of purchasing for the university, and we changed 16 cars approximately every 2 years. I know it's not much, but could you talk to him? Always happy to do business, and you know I'll make a deal with them," I said. "I'll ask Jim to call you at the end of this week." "Thank you," I said. That's how I grew my business, by treating people right and letting them know I valued their referrals. On Wednesday, my lawyer called me. "Hey, Kurt, I think I have a solution to your potential problem. Could you come by this afternoon to discuss it with me?" "Of course. I can't wait to start." "The atmosphere in my house is becoming simply unbearable," I said. At the meeting that day, I heard the plan and liked it. It will take about 2 weeks to implement, but if it works, it will be worth it. During these 2 weeks, I slowly moved personal belongings and tools from my home to an apartment in a nearby city. Also, during those 2 weeks, George was anxiously waiting for those 24 cars to arrive to do some work that he could bill me for. When he asked, I just put it off. This past weekend, I did some yard work, and when Jenna and Carrie weren't around, I cleaned out my closet and drawers. Jenna did laundry during the week, so she could do what she wanted on the weekends. This was good for me because she didn't notice that my closet was empty. So this takes me back to that Monday night when I said to Jenna, "I'm leaving." She started being rude and disrespectful to me again, both as a Pole and as a used car salesman. In the past, I would go to a motel for a night or two, depending on how angry I was. On Tuesday morning after this explosion, I arrived at the parking lot early, and as my employees were entering, I asked them to go to the conference room. I closed the door behind them. I had weekly meetings, so this was nothing unusual. I started the meeting. "Good morning. As you all know, the cars that I bought a couple of weeks ago arrived yesterday afternoon. All of them have already been checked and prepared, so they are ready for sale. Right now, we no longer use George to do any work here. If he asks you, tell him we decided to go in a different direction, and leave it at that. You've all been amazing, you're like family, so it's hard for me to come to terms with what's next." I paused and wiped a tear from my eye. I sold the business. They all looked at me, there was surprise in their eyes. "However, nothing will change as far as your work is concerned." "Well, Besides, Anna, you will perform some of my duties, and of course, will receive a corresponding increase. All of them, even in their surprised state, began to congratulate Anna. They all respected her and knew she deserved it. Anna, after the meeting, please come and talk to me. We will discuss some things. I will still be involved in the company, but only on an advisory basis and may sell occasionally. I don't want to take away your sales. They were all glad that I would still be around, at least sometimes. The meeting ended, and as we walked out the door, George was standing there. Hey, why wasn't I included in the meeting? He had been present at most of the previous meetings. Because it was a staff meeting, and you're not an employee, I said. He stuttered a little and then said, I see that the cars have finally arrived, so I'll get to work on them right away. No, they have already been carefully examined and prepared for sale. You don't need to do anything with them, I said sternly. He looked at me stunned. But I will check all your cars, Kurt. What's happening? George, I sold the business, and the new owner wants to move in a different direction. I told him, not ready to explode at him. I'll save that for another day. I left everything as is. It became clear to me that sometimes it is better to say fewer words. I can't believe you sold the business, he exclaimed. What should I do now? Of course, it was all about him. He was basically told that he was out of work. Well, I said you can pick up your check for what you did in the last 2 weeks. It wasn't that much. Anna used his services only a few times. He was relaxing before delivering 23 cars, thinking he would be busy when they arrived. How wrong he was. I didn't feel sorry for him at all. I just wish I could tell them that it was because he was a mean. When I met Anna, I asked her if she could keep our conversation a secret. Of course, Kurt, you know I'll never say anything you don't want, she assured me. Okay, here's the thing. I created companies that I registered in Nevada. One of the companies buys this parking lot, the other buys that company. I am the sole owner of shares in both companies. At some point, I will divorce Jenna and make sure she doesn't get the business. Why? She asked. I moved out of my house. Jenna doesn't know it yet, but I'm not going back. She had an affair with George. Actually, Carrie is not my daughter. I believe she is George's daughter. I don't even know if Jenna knows about this, let alone George. They'll soon find out. I'm not going to get a divorce, but I will continue to pay utilities and taxes for our house. This way, she won't be able to say that I abandoned her and take everything I have. Just in case she files for divorce due to irreconcilable differences, I don't want her to be able to take over the business. That's why I agreed that the company would be bought twice. Let them try to figure out what's going on. The proceeds from the sale will be spent by the time she gets her divorce done. Plus, I make next to nothing from consulting and a few commissions from sales. Anna, you are able to cope with daily operations. I'll be available to call if you have any questions, but let me say that I trust you and I trust your judgment. The smile came back to her face when I told her about the new owner, but when she heard about Jenna and George, she looked like she was ready to shoot someone. This was a woman whom I truly admired and respected. I continued, I have one more task for you, and then I will leave you. I need you to order a new sign and letterhead. We are changing the name of the business. This will further cement in George and Jenna's minds that the business has been sold to someone else. The new name of the business will be Helpless Car. I spelled the name so I knew she had it right. She looked at me in bewilderment. Someday I'll tell you why I chose this name. Suffice it to say, it tells the whole story. I said. She still looked puzzled, but she trusted me enough to follow my instructions. With that, I left, saying a few words to everyone as I left. I got into my car, an Audi, and drove down the road towards Albuquerque. About 2 hours passed when I received the call. Caller ID told me it was Jenna. I didn't expect her to call before the end of the evening. This has happened many times before. When I left, I'd go away for a day or two. She'd call. We'd talk, and I'd come back. Everything changed for a while. and then we became the same again. After a while, we would have a quarrel again, and the cycle would start all over again. I decided to answer the call, waiting to hear what nonsense he would spew this time. "Hello," I said through the speakerphone in the car. "CT, what's going on?" she said, somewhat hesitantly. "Nothing, just going to Albuquerque." "Why are you going there?" "To pick up the car," I said without emotion. So what I heard must not be true. So George must have called her, figuratively speaking. "Call your mistress to find out what is happening with her husband." "I don't know," I said. "What did you hear?" "George called me and said that you sold the business." "Why would he call you?" I asked, perplexing her. She corrected herself. "H-E-K, your best friend." He wondered if I knew what was going on. Best friend, what a joke. I was a joke to him, the stupid Pole who is helpless and does not know what is happening behind his back with his own wife. Apparently, my family was embarrassed that I was a used car salesman. So yes, I sold the business. Now you won't have to bear that stigma anymore. "Shouldn't we have talked about this first?" she said. I'm sure she was worried about how we would live. "Now, this is my company. I owned it before we got married, and I can sell it whenever I want. I just hope the new owner treats my former employees well." "So, did you get a good price for it?" Again, she was worried about how this would affect her standard of living. I didn't care. I just knew I needed to change jobs. "I'll start looking after I take a few weeks off to relax." "What about a mortgage?" she asked. "Oh, I used the money to pay off the house. You don't have to worry about that now. You just need to pay utilities and taxes." "What about food? What about gas? What about insurance?" she said, almost hysterical. "Oh, I guess I'm a stupid Pole. I didn't even think about them." "Do you think you could take on more hours at your job now?" She was excited. "When are you going to come back home?" This is the moment of truth. "I won't come back," I said casually. "What?" "I told you that evening that I was leaving. You told me not to come back, so I won't come back." "Don't worry. I'll find a way to pay all the utilities so the power won't be turned off." "You can't do this. Kurt, you must go back." I heard the desperation in her voice. "No, I really don't want to," I said dispassionately. "CT, don't do this," she cried. "I did it already." "What about your daughter?" she asked, trying to tug at my heartstrings. "You mean Carrie, the girl who is ashamed of her last name and the fact that her old man is or was a used car salesman? Kurt, she's just a 13-year-old girl. You can't take this to heart." "Well, it doesn't matter anymore. I won't be back again, so none of you will be embarrassed of me." With these words, I hung up and turned off the phone. Let her think about it. I knew that now she was trying to call me back and would be angry that I wasn't answering the phone. After calming down from the phone call, I tried to enjoy the leisurely drive to Albuquerque. I could only assume that the next call she would make was to her lover to get more information and to let him know what I had said. When I got to my destination, I turned my phone back on and saw that I had 5 messages. I listened to them all. 3 from Jenna, 1 from George, and 1 from Anna. I immediately called Anna. "Hi Anna. Sorry my phone was turned off. I have had unwanted calls." "Yes, I know. Your wife and George called me to find out where you were. I told them you don't own this place anymore, so you don't come anymore. Hope everything is okay." "Great," I said. "If they give you too much trouble, tell them you're calling the police about phone harassment." "I like it," she said. "Kurt, you may feel like you don't have any family or friends anymore, but trust me, you do. We are your family and always will be." "Thank you, Anna. You know what to say. I hope your husband knows how lucky he is." "Trust me, he knows. He constantly tells me about this. Never lose this. Don't take each other for granted." "I'm not going to," she said. After hanging up, I wondered if I should call my cheating wife or this. No, let them rage. I got out of the Audi and went into the parking lot office. The owner was waiting for me there. "I have that Audi that I told you about. Would you like to discuss if we can make an exchange? Let's see, he said. He was impressed with the condition of the car, both inside and out, as well as under the hood. He looked at me. I can sell it in a week. Are you sure you want to make an exchange? I feel like I'm getting a better deal. You can reciprocate sometime in the future. I'm not here to make money. I'm here to get a sports car. Half an hour later, I was back on the road, top down, enjoying the ride. Now I had to decide where to go. North sounded good, so I headed to Santa Fe. Over the next 2 weeks, I traveled through northern New Mexico, Arizona, southern Utah, and Colorado. I wanted to be nearby in case Anna needed me to come back. I called her several times, and when it became clear that she had everything sorted out, I decided to head west. Of course, they kept calling me. At first, they were annoyed, then apologetic, and finally, there were notes of bitchiness in them. I listened, but I didn't care. When they called me and told me that the credit card had been canceled, I just laughed. When George called and said I was a terrible person for leaving Jenna and Carrie, I had to laugh even more. My lawyer actually sent me a message. Jenna called and threatened to file a stay-at-home order if I didn't contact her and come back. I called him back. Hello, this is Kurt. So, my wife called you with threats? Yes, but I wouldn't worry. If you're still paying on the house, she'll have a hard time proving it. I can do something better for you. I have a recording where I tell her I'm leaving, and she tells me not to come back. It's amazing. Send me a copy of it, he said. If she gives me any trouble, I'll take it to her lawyer. Let her lawyer try to force things. Thank you. I'll call you in a week to find out what's going on. I've traveled all over the Southwest. The Miata wasn't the most comfortable car, but it was fun. A lot of people looked at me. Even some of my tits flashed from bored, anxious middle-aged women, but I wasn't looking for that. After all, I was still married. No matter what it took, I drove to Reno, then Lake Tahoe, the coast, Napa Valley, and Highway 1, zigzagging and zagging along the shoreline. Then I went to Yosemite, then to San Diego, through Death Valley to Vegas, and then to Phoenix. I was in no hurry, stopped in parking lots, talked to the owners, and just chatted. Some of them were jealous that a guy in his 30s could just pick up and travel. After about 3 months and 8,000 miles, I decided to return to Silver City. When I arrived at Helpless Auto, I was greeted by my entire team. In fact, there were several new faces. They all welcomed my return. When I entered Anna's office, formerly my office, she raised her head when she saw me. Her smile grew even wider. She stood up, walked around her desk, and hugged me tightly. We talked for a while, and then I asked, "Do you think I can invite everyone to Wrangler's for food and drinks? Could you close the store at 5? At this point, it was 3, and I had a few errands to run. Of course, I will insist on this. The whole team will be there, I said. Goodbye, and told them all that I'll see you in 2 hours. They were in a good mood. Then I visited my lawyer. He told me earlier when I was traveling that Jenna tried to go down the abandonment route to get all my property, but he was able to thwart her efforts. We talked about what to do next. At 5, I met the team at Wrangler Restaurant. We had a great dinner, and it was nice talking to everyone. After about an hour and a half, they began to go home. Finally, it was just Anna and me. I left. She looked at me and said, "You know, Kurt, you may think that you are helpless, vulnerable, and don't understand anything, but you're wrong. You simply trusted those you loved." I looked at her. "So you got it right." "Yes, it took me a while, but you said the new name would tell the whole story." This haunted me until I realized it. You may be Polish, but all these jokes can never describe the real you. These jokes are an insult to you and your roots. Thank you, Anna. You are truly the main reason for my return. I had to see how you handle my responsibilities. Happy to say that you have not filled my shoes, but rather created a pair of your own. I had an excellent mentor, she thanked. We hugged, and she went home to her husband. He truly was a happy man. I returned to the apartment I had not been in for 3 months. It was musty here and needed good ventilation. I opened the windows and let the cool evening air fill the rooms. I grabbed a beer and sat on the terrace overlooking the pool. Several people were swimming there, and a family was playing. I thought about Jenna and me. We had such high hopes and dreams when we got married. Now they have all disappeared. Looking at the clock on the wall, I saw that it was about 8:30. A thought flashed through my head. Looks like it's time for a showdown. I got up, jumped into my Miata, and drove to my house. I guess technically it was still mine. I bought it before Jenna, and I got married, and my name was the only one on the deed. I was disappointed when I pulled into the driveway. The yard was not well kept. It seemed that the landscaping had not even been touched. The light was on, and I assumed Jenna was home. I went to the door and knocked. A minute later, the door opened, and Carrie stood there. Her eyes got big, and she asked, "Dad." "Hi, Carrie. Is your mom home?" She stuttered and then shouted, "Mother." I heard Jenna shout from the kitchen in a tense, high-pitched voice, "What's the matter?" She continued to look at me and said loudly in response, "Dad." Jenna came around the corner, saw me, and screamed, "Where are you going?" I decided to answer her cry in a calm, even voice. At that moment, George came out of the bedroom wearing only his underpants. "Oh," I said, the whole family is here, Mom, Dad, and child." "What the hell are you talking about?" Jenna spat back. "I suppose George moved to take my place after all. It is rightfully his." Jenna looked at me with a puzzled expression. Carrie said, "He lost his apartment after you fired him, and Mom needed a man to help pay the bills and take care of other responsibilities here since you left." Then the rage in her voice was palpable. "Well, young lady, it appears you were misinformed." He hated it when I corrected her. George was never my employee, and his insistence, so I could not fire him. As for bills, all utilities are paid, as is car insurance. "What about food and gasoline in the car?" Jenna shouted. "You had a job. Did you lose it?" "I know that before it was just your mad money, but it was enough for groceries and gasoline while I was away." "So you think you'll come back? Back and just move back?" she asked. "No, I'll wait until you and your lover find somewhere to live." It was obvious that they were sleeping together in my house, and Carrie seemed okay with that. "I'm not going to move out of my house," Jenna said. "Correction, this is my house. It was mine before we got married, and only my name is written on the contract." I replied, "Well, you left, so now he's mine." "The law doesn't work that way. Since I pay the utilities and taxes, I am still the legal owner, and even though I have been gone for a short period of taxes, I am still the legal owner, and even though I have been gone for a short period of time, I still own it. Don't worry, I'll give you lovebirds until the end of next month to find a place to live. Just make sure you take your daughter with you." "What do you mean, your daughter?" "She is our daughter." You couldn't think of more truthful words. I chuckled. Jenna looked puzzled. Then I said to Carrie, "Carrie, I know you hate being called Polish, so I have good news for you. Your real father is not me but George." The silence in the room was deafening. After a minute, Jenna meekly asked, "What?" "Yes, Jenna, it seems that your little carelessness on your wedding day led to the appearance of a child, but not mine. But good news for you, Carrie, you can now take your real dad's last name and become Carrie. I wonder if maybe Mom didn't insist on the name Carrie as a sign of respect for her lover." I looked at Jenna, and she looked at George. He was white as a ghost. "What, George? Don't you want to be a dad?" "Well, that's a shame. Take responsibility. But look at it this way. It's just 4 more years, and then college." Jenna and George said almost in unison, "I do not believe in that." I threw them the DNA report. See for yourself." They grabbed it, looked at it, and then both fainted. "Carrie, tell the lovebirds that your mom will be served with divorce papers sometime next week, along with an eviction notice." I turned and walked away. The whole time I was gone, I wondered if this affair had been going on throughout the marriage. In fact, I wondered if she was even faithful to me. We met when she came to buy a car. George was working on a car, and we both thought it would be a great date. Did she choose me or not? I truly was helpless, ignorant, vulnerable all this time. George laughed at me behind my back and also made polished jokes in front of my face. I returned to the apartment and drank beer. In the morning, I went to the lawyer and asked him to start processing the documents. Of course, I knew that I would have to sell the house and split the proceeds, but being a barely working person, I did not have to pay alimony or child support, especially since there was already another man in my place. At least, that's what I hoped. I loved Jenna and George. The betrayal was incredible. It will take me a long time to trust anyone, be it a man or a woman. Maybe I should see a psychologist. As the divorce proceedings progressed, I returned to work at the car dealership, but as a salesman. I made it clear to all employees that I was no longer the boss, and that I only needed one sale a week to pay the rent and buy groceries. In fact, I insisted on only one. When it came to court-mandated child support, I wanted to ensure that at the end of the month, I had no money other than my own meager living expenses. Jenna hired a lawyer. I don't know how she could afford it. Maybe he worked pro bono. He'll be surprised. They looked at my bank accounts and saw that I had spent the proceeds from the sale. They even looked at the sale itself, but found nothing wrong with it. They didn't dig deep enough. I heard from my fellow salespeople that while I was away, George came in almost every day for the first 2 weeks and talked to Anna about getting some work. She had no problem telling him no every time. In the end, he gave up. Now he regretted never getting his ASE certification because the only job he could find was at Valine Quick Oil Change with a salary of $13 per hour. I hoped Jenna went full-time, or they would have a hard time making ends meet. I contacted the realtor and informed Jenna that I was putting the house on the market in anticipation of a 50-50 split of all of our assets. She had already been served with an eviction notice, so she had to move out before the house was sold and closed. One evening, there was a knock on my door. Of course, it was Jenna. Opening the door, I looked at her. "What do you need, Kurt? Can we talk? I don't think this is a good idea. We're in a lawsuit against each other." "Come on, Kurt, it's just me here. No lawyers. Can't we sit down and have a civil conversation?" "Yeah, I guess, but let's go to Denny's," I said. There will be witnesses, I thought to myself. I didn't trust her enough to be alone with her. We sat down in a booth at Denny's, and after a couple of minutes of pleasantries, I asked, "Why, Jenna?" She looked at me, hesitated, and answered, "I think the simple answer is that I liked both of you, and I couldn't decide." "So you were dating both of us at the same time?" She looked down at the table. "Yes," she admitted. "But George told me not to tell you anything because he knew it would ruin your personal and work relationship with him. So when I asked you to marry me, why did you say yes?" I asked. "Because I loved you." "What about George?" I asked. "I loved him too, but I understood that he would never be a suitable husband. When you asked me, he and I discussed it and ended our relationship. I wanted to focus on us and the preparations for our wedding. So, on our wedding day, while having a night with him, you said, 'I'm marrying him, but you're still my man.'" She started crying. Everything was wrong then. "What was it, Jenna?" She hesitated and then said, "I didn't want to lose him, and he didn't want to lose me." "Well, now you have each other and your child." By the way, she did a great job with the name. I didn't even notice until I had time to think during the 3 months on the road. "I didn't know Carrie wasn't yours," I said. "I really didn't." Then she looked at me and said, "Kurt, I wanted to talk to you today to tell you that I still love you." "It's nice to hear from you, Jenna. But I don't think you know what love is. I love you more than anything in the world, and obviously, you can't say the same. I loved you, but I can honestly say that I don't love you anymore. I loved you with all my heart, but now I feel only contempt for you," I said. When I said this, she looked up at me and realized that our relationship was over. There will never be us again. I had to ask her one more question. "Have you ever stopped?" She hesitated, and then apparently decided that it didn't matter, and told the truth. We never stopped. We had our lulls, but we got together usually twice a month. I was hoping for a different answer, but I was still glad she told me the truth. One more question. What happened about a year ago that made you treat me so badly? Your attitude towards me began to change. The outward contempt was obvious, I asked. Her face turned red. Then she got a little angry. George started trying to talk me into having a threesome, and not with you. I probably could have done it if you had participated, but we couldn't figure out how to do it. He kept insisting on it, and it made me resent you for something I know you would never do. I know it sounds strange, but I thought I could have my two men loving me together, and I resented you for not being the person to allow it. So you did it? I asked. No, I thought about it, but then you left, and my whole world collapsed. Well, now you can do it. Knowing that I don't care what you do, it doesn't bother me anymore, I said. 4 months later, we stood before a judge, and he declared us divorced. George was there too. As we were leaving the courthouse, Jenna said, "Maybe we can have a drink the old-fashioned way." Of course, I said. By this time, the animosity I felt towards the two of them had disappeared. Then I thought, this will be the last time I have to be with them. Now they can be alone. Let the pigs live in their own filth. They deserve each other. Jenna will have to get used to a lower standard of living. Okay, maybe the animosity hasn't gone away. I may be Polish, but I am a respected person. Thanks to everyone who took the time to listen to today's stories. If you enjoyed it, please consider liking and subscribing if you haven't already. Feel free to share your thoughts on the events in the comments below. Take care. Thanks to everyone who took the time to listen to today's stories. If you enjoyed it, please consider liking and subscribing if you haven't already. Feel free to share your thoughts on the events in the comments below. Take care.